Hello, everyone. Welcome to Guildmaster Gaming. This time around, I have writer, author, editor, multi-talented within the writing community, Sylvia Langille. I've had the opportunity of working with Sylvia on some different projects, and we have done a few different things together. And my phone just dinged. What a great timing. Uh, so,
Started off great.
right off the bat. Uh, so, anyway, we're going to talk about several of your projects and things that have happened, but we're going to start with your books here. So, Sylvia, why don't you go ahead and give your introduction of yourself and tell us a little bit about the book that you helped edit. This is not, or this isn't the place.
Yeah. So my name's Sylvia. I write under the name C.R. Langille. I've been writing for over 25 years. I started Timber Ghost Press in January of 21, which is a small local press here in Utah that publishes horror, specializes in horror. Um, yeah, I am the co-chair of the Utah chapter of the Horror Writers Association. I'm the DEI chair for the League of Utah Writers. But yeah, as far as that book goes, this isn't the place. That's one of our annual Utah collection of horror anthologies that we like to do every year. It's something that we kind of came up with in the horror writers chapter. Something we wanted to do to kind of just promote horror in the state and bring some focus to Utah a little bit. So we started that back in I think 2013 or 2014 was our first one that came out, which was Old Scratch and Owl Hoots. And we've been doing one every year since. We'll get together, we'll vote on a theme and then a title. And then in the past, we've had different publishing houses pick up that project and do it. And then when I started Timber Ghost, we talked about it, and everyone just kind of agreed like that I would publish those. That way, we can control inventory easier instead of reaching out to a bunch of different publishers to get inventory. I can just pull it on my own and have them ready for conventions and whatnot. So yeah, but this isn't the place. That one came about. We decided to do a theme of like hauntings that take place in locations other than houses because the haunted house has been done to death, right? And don't get me wrong, I love a good haunted house story, but they're a dime a dozen. So we wanted to do something a little bit unique. Plus, it's kind of a play on the whole like this is the place thing that what was it Brigham Young said when they came through Immigration Canyon and like saw the valley and all that. So just kind of a play on that. But that's a fun. It was a fun project to do. Really fun to see what everyone came up with and put it together, arrange the stories, in such a manner that I thought was a good logical way to go through it, or at least just a fun way to go through it. But yeah, it was a great project and fun. I enjoyed it.
And just kind of clarify for the people that might not know some of the Utah history, because this goes all over. Uh, when the Mormons came to Utah the first time as they're coming through, that was the big thing. And there, that this is the place, and there's this is the place monument, and there's a little
Mm-hmm.
park around where the monument's at that's showing heritage. So it's for those of us here, it's like, oh yeah, we immediately recognize it.
Oh
But
yeah.
for some of the other, it might be a little bit more obscure. Now, this was your 2024 outing for the
Mm-hmm.
anthology for the group, and
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of bring up last year in 2024, you were also given the honor of Editor of the Year for the League of Utah Writers.
Yeah. Yeah. That was an amazing honor. I was so stoked to win it. I didn't think I was going to win. They had reached out beforehand asking, saying that I was nominated and if I was okay with that, because it does come with some responsibilities and whatnot. And I was like, yeah, sure. Never really even thought that I would win. I was just like, oh, that's nice to be nominated. That's feels nice. And then when they announced it at the Quills Award banquet, I was just blown away, and it was a huge honor and just amazing. I don't do this for awards or anything like that, but it is nice to get recognized every now and then.
Now, this is not your first anthology that I've read,
Right.
that the chapters put together, or even your personal works, which we'll get to here in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I will say that I like about the anthologies that you do, and something I've learned uh, from reading your anthologies among some other very prominent, award-winning anthologies, is you have the ability to create a story arc with the stories, which is a really kind of fun thing to see.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it's a
So,
little bit harder with anthologies when you got different authors like contributing and whatnot. With my own work, when I'm putting a collection together, I can try and put an arc like together. Or, like I know you've read Branches and Bones with my character Evelyn Horn. That was a very deliberate story arc that I crafted
mhm.
for that. It's technically a collection because it's three short stories and a novella, but I mean it's got a huge like series arc basically in there. So.
Yep. Well, even in these, because that's one of the things I've noticed, I've read some anthologies, you can tell the difference of a good editor versus a poor editor. Because I've heard so many times people say, oh, you put the best story first, the second best story last, and whatever goes in the middle, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
And I can see the smirk there. You're going, oh, no, no, no.
No, no, no. Like I made the mistake once of not really um, concerning myself too much with how I place stories, other than like the first and the last one in one of my anthologies I put together. Um, and I could tell, like, even though I try not to read reviews too often on even stuff that I publish, right? Unless I have to, if I'm looking for good reviews for marketing. I could tell some of those like comments in there, like that was one of the things that they were criticizing. It's like, oh, this wasn't well put together, like you had two vampire stories like right next to each other and blah blah blah. I'm like, oh yeah. So kind of after that, it was like one of those learning moments, right? Like, all right, I really do need to take care with how I put these and craft these together. So after that, I really started paying attention with how I place the stories. I will put the two strongest ones as like the opener and the closing, just because I want to start with a bang and I want to end with a good bang. But it's subjective, right? Those are the strongest ones in my opinion. Not,
Mhm.
you may read it and have a completely different opinion, and that's great. It's one of the reasons why I like to have three judges when I do these anthologies, and do blind reads with the judges. That way, it takes out a lot of that bias on who's getting selected and whatnot. And it's just being based solely on the story's merit and how well it fits within the theme and is it horror and all that. So, yeah, like just kind of selecting like in the middle, selecting the middle content is the hardest part because I have to kind of like set the pacing and the tone and the mood for the whole anthology and just keep that momentum going through all of it. Because I don't want a reader to get bored with something, put it down, and never pick it up again, right? I want them to enjoy everything they're doing with like rising moments of like a really intense story, and maybe the next one's a little bit slower pace just to kind of give you that breather until we get, it's kind of like a roller coaster. So,
So that's a good lesson for anybody that's moving into editing and working with anthologies. Is
yeah.
that is something that's really, really serious. And that's something I've noticed you. And like I said, I love anthologies. So there's a couple other people I know that do them, but you're one of the people that when I read them, you can tell there's been some thought in the placement of how the story kind of weaves and how one
Appreciate
story kind of leads into the next one and maybe
it.
keeps a storyline going, even though you're going, wait a minute, they're totally different, but there's a following theme between them. Now, you say you judge them blind, and I take it that's because this is something people should, as writers, know that this is not constricted to just members of the chapter.
Right. Yeah. When we do our anthology calls, I know that was a big misconception early on when we formed. There was this thing people thought we were just like, our own little club and that we only like published each other's stories and all that stuff. That's not it at all. Um, Chapter members still have to write a really good story and get selected with those blind reads. Um, Sometimes they get picked, sometimes they don't. I would love for the chapter members to always get in each one, but also too, I want to give that opportunity like to all horror writers out there, to try and get into these anthologies. And I think the way that we handle it is a decent way to do it, to give a fair chance to everybody.
Okay. So that's kind of talking about your work. This isn't the place, which is put together by the chapter. So let's kind of shift a little bit now to more of your
Ooh,
personal work.
I do want to
Oh,
make one caveat. Like, so
sure.
officially, like the HWA doesn't like endorse any of the chapters out there. Like if they put together anthologies or anything like that, it's not officially sponsored or endorsed by the HWA at all. It's just something that we as a chapter want to do just to promote horror. So,
Kind of raise awareness of the greatness of horror.
Right. Yes.
And we're going to talk more about horror after I get through yours too, because uh, I know that's something that we kind of have a common sharing because we've sat on panels together talking about horror. Uh,
Yes, we have.
so your other one, this is your work, and these are
Hmm.
all your stories. You should not be.
You should
Uh,
not be. Yep.
so this was a lot of fun to read through and kind of see it. And I'll admit the kickoff story I just thought was absolutely impressive, basically because of just what I was talking about. We've sat on panels together talking about horror. You
Yeah.
kick off with a story about the King in Yellow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that story is like one of my favorite stories that I've ever written. Um, it's just a fun story because I had this idea of like, okay, what if the Wicked Witch of the West came back to life to find Oz changed, and that change was cosmic, in scope. So I based that whole thing off of, okay, what if the King in Yellow came to Oz? So, but yeah, it was fun, and it's a little bit different than some of my other stories too, which was also fun, just to kind of play around with a little bit different style and stuff. So.
Yeah, that's one thing about this anthology is, I mean, it really runs a gamut of different styles of,
Well, the cool thing about that one is like, yeah, there's a lot of my newer stuff in there, and then there's some of my older works in there as well. And what's happening now is I think I'm finally finding my voice, my writing voice. So I think my stories that are coming out now are leagues beyond what they were before. Um, which anyone who writes a lot and as you get better in that craft will notice, like if you compare it to your older works, you're like, oh, I don't even like to read this old stuff anymore. I'm kind of embarrassed to even like put it out there, but at the same time someone might enjoy this. um, but yeah, and not only that, but like my fears are changing, so like what I write about changes. Yeah, obviously I'm trans. So like um, that has changed my writing a lot too. Like when I finally came out and accepted all that and started embracing it, it changed like what I write about as well. So like I think in You Should Not Be, like you start to see that change a little bit. But the next collection I put together, when I have enough stories for it, it will be a very obvious shift um, in tone and whatnot. It will still be cosmic horror. It will still be C.R. Langille, if you like my style and everything like that. Just the messaging between the words is going to be a little different. So,
but you recognize yourself as a horror writer
mm-hmm,
uh, and really kind of dive into that. And the reason why I'll let people know, the reason why I found that story so impressive, a couple of years ago, Sylvia and I were on a panel together at the Fan X convention, and we did the impact of H.P. Lovecraft on modern horror.
mm-hmm, yeah,
And kind of having fun with it. If you're not familiar with the King in Yellow, this won't mean much. But when everybody came in, we had a packed room. They closed the doors, and I announced we wanted to thank everybody for coming to this production of The King in Yellow. And a small group kind of chuckled out, and Sylvia popped up with, and we will start right in with Act Two.
mm-hmm. That's the good one. The one that
So
gets you.
it was a way of finding our Cthulhu fans, and
Mm-hmm.
where we could kind of impact that in. So
Yeah.
as a horror writer, why horror? What draws you to write horror?
Well, um, so I was introduced to horror at a very young age. Maybe too young. I don't know. But watching like monster movies with my mom when I was like 5 years old, Saturday morning, like, or Saturday afternoon matinees on the TV that come on, we'd watch them. We'd go to movies all the time, and a lot of those movies were scary movies because we both liked them and whatnot. So I grew up like watching Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Chucky, all that kind of stuff, Child's Play. Um, so it really kind of imprinted on me at a very young age and has influenced me as I've grown. And then as I got older and really got into reading, of course, I started reading a lot of horror books. So obviously I enjoy it, but why do I like to write about it? All that kind of stuff. There's a number of different reasons. One, I think the emotions that come into play when we play with horror are those raw, visceral kind of emotions that come up. very powerful ones, fear, unknown, change, threat of death or existence or all that kind of stuff. Want to get into cosmic, like there's all sorts of even bigger threats than that. Um, but really, too, I think it's a way to process fears in a healthy manner, right? I can write about something I'm scared about on the page in a safe way. For me, is kind of process through those emotions a little bit, those fears, and present them in a way that is, like I said before, like a safe way. You know, I can see it like almost a voyeuristic type of thing, looking in and like see these things happening that I'm putting on the page, and not have to experience it myself. Hopefully, right? Because I write about some horrible things, but so for me, like writing is just a way to like work through all that stuff.
And I think that's the same thing what draws a lot of people to reading and watching horror
Mm-hmm.
is it's a way
Absolutely.
of processing and kind of dealing with things that they're when they're out there instead of in here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Plus, too, like when we're watching something scary or we read a book that really gets underneath our skin, it creates those like body responses to that, right? And some of those are adrenaline and dopamine that pop up, and we like that, like maybe not adrenaline all the time, but just it's a different kind of emotion or feeling. And I think people are just looking for ways to like experience different things, and horror offers that as a different avenue. Same thing with like romance, right? Horror and romance go like almost hand in hand because they're dealing with those raw, powerful emotions. So,
I actually, when I teach some of the new people I know about writing, I always tell them every good story has a element of horror and an element of romance.
mhm, for
And I
sure.
think it's very true because they do play off very quickly and similar to the same emotions. It's
Yes.
just even it's been recognized probably one of the best horror films or series was The Alien.
Mhm.
Yeah. And there's even romance in there, but people don't recognize it immediately because it's between her and her cat.
Right. Yeah.
So it's all that there. But now you've taken it one step further, not just horror. You kind of specialize in cosmic horror and
Mhm.
are
Yeah.
known for from people about writing your cosmic horror. What do you think is the draw for you and maybe for readers or people that watch it about that area or subgenre of horror?
Um, I don't know. Like when I was younger, I picked up a Lovecraft anthology at some point and started reading it and found that I enjoyed some of the stories in there. Like there's a lot of Lovecraft's work that's just crap. Just boring, like poorly written crap. But there's like a few gems in there and whatnot. And of course, Lovecraft comes with his own issues and problems, right? Uh, Not a great person overall. Um, but we can't deny his contribution to Cosmic Core. And so reading that really, I really got into it because I really just love that big overall mythos that kind of came about from Lovecraft's work, and then other authors kind of like started adding their own things to it or playing around with it. We mentioned King in Yellow with Robert Chambers, which was written before like any of Lovecraft's things got kind of famous, if I remember correctly. But has also kind of been sucked into those mythos, those Cthulhu mythos, with King in Yellow, Hastur, all that kind of stuff. I just really enjoy like stories that play on these things where there's something out there that's kind of bigger than humanity. Um, that when we start to piece all the puzzle pieces together and get that final piece in there, it will drive us insane because it's just so unfathomable of like what it is out there. Like the idea that we're just a small speck of dust, if even that, in these things' eyes, is kind of an interesting play because, yeah, you can have your books about a vampire or something like that, or, werewolves or zombies, and they can be scary and well written, and I enjoy those too. However, like a werewolf coming at me versus some eldritch terror that I can't even really describe, like coming in through my dreams or breaking through reality, is way more terrifying than that werewolf, right? Um, because with cosmic you can really go anywhere with it as far as what it is, whatever it is that we're dealing with. and just the grand scale of it, I find to be fun to play around with.
And opens up some different doors that
For sure, yeah, because I like to create my own mythos. The fun thing I like to do in my stories is I like to connect them to other stories. And it may just be a one line in there. And if you've read that other one, you'll be like, oh, little Easter egg, right? Like now these are connected, they're in the same world. So the big bad thing that they're dealing with is also in the same world of the big bad thing that the other characters are dealing with. And now it starts to open up this huge, I don't know, like my own little mythos, basically, of what's going on. And it's going to tie into a new project that I'm working on. So, yeah.
kind of gives a little bit of coherence. It's one of those things that people have talked about. I can't remember, some major horror writer that tied all of his stories together,
Yeah, I think his name was Stefan or something like
something like
that.
that. Uh, I can see where that kind of plays in because I have noticed that in some of the readings I've done of yours, where it's like, oh,
Mhm.
okay. And I think that's always fun to see because if you catch those little points, they're great little elements that add the layers to a story
Mhm.
that aren't needed, but just adds so much more depth. So I compliment you on doing that,
Oh,
and
thanks.
being able to pull that together and making it work so well. So, so I'm sure that you see as an editor and a publisher now, and kind of focusing on where you and knowing that people know what you like, you see a lot of cosmic horror.
Yeah.
Have you seen any shifts? Because I've seen, without getting to what I've seen a shift in cosmic horror in the things that I review, and I was wondering, have you seen a shift to what people are writing about in terms of cosmic horror?
A little bit, yeah. For one, it's becoming more diverse, which is amazing. Uh, you're not just getting it from the regular old, like what you would consider a horror author from the 80s, right? Nothing wrong, like not bashing horror authors from the 80s, but we have so much stuff from that kind of like that kind of demographic that it's great to be seeing, all these other cosmic horror stories coming out from different cultures, people with different backgrounds, different points of view, because they're going to put that into their writing. I published one with Timber Ghost, is called The Scientist, the Spaceman, and the Stars Between Them. And it is an amazing, like, cosmic horror story, but it's also echo horror, grief horror, queer horror. Like, it ticks these other boxes too. And so it's like this huge, like, assorted, like, mix of chocolates, basically. Like, and you never know what you're going to get as you're reading through it. And the ending of that book, I still think about. Like, it's been almost a year and a half since I first read it, and I still think about it because it has that much impact, right? So just seeing like the different voices coming forward with cosmic horror is really awesome to see. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing or not, or seeing something different, but yeah.
I'm seeing a little bit of an interesting diversity of what people are calling on. Um, in the last film festival, I was at Film Quest, and they had a feature and a short that led into the feature, and both of them were cosmic horror, and neither one of them dealt with Cthulhu, which
Hmm.
I thought, so many stories you'd say, oh, it's Cthulhu, it's Cthulhu. Both of these played off of the Dream Lord. Uh,
Oh yeah.
so I thought it was a
Well, that's
very
the cool thing too.
interesting.
Like, oh, sorry.
No, I was
Go
just
ahead.
going, it was an interesting twist to see that, oh, we're going to do cosmic horror. And everybody's going, oh, we're expecting this. And it was like, oh, no, it's subtly different. That if you understand the mythos, it just provided, like you were saying, with the depth of other things, it provided a whole different depth to the story of what was happening.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I like Cthulhu and like everything kind of around those mythos and whatnot. But I'm to the point now that if I see like a Cthulhu like mythos story, I'm just like, oh, okay, this has been overdone. Like let's see, yeah, like Cthulhu is everywhere. There's toys. You got one there, plushies, like little T-shirts with cute Cthulhu's on them, all this stuff. I love it. But at the same time, like I really don't want to read Cthulhu stories anymore. So when these newer ones come out that deal with just the idea of cosmic horror, but they've made their own, or they're playing with like a lesser known like elder god or old one or something like that, I'm all for that. Like, let's start opening the doors to other things, you know.
Yeah. It was fun
Or
seeing
not, I
some
don't know.
stories. Yeah. I was
When we
going to say it
talked
was
about
fun
cosmic
recently
horror.
seeing some stories where they talked about Migos, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, Migos. Like, and that leads to, what was it, Color Out of Space? Like, that's a great story, you know, just the idea of it. And then, did you watch that Nicolas Cage Color Out of Space movie that popped up like 4 or 5 years ago?
I have not seen that one.
It was actually pretty good, pretty well done cosmic horror.
Okay.
Um,
Space. Okay. Notes taken. So I want to ask you, what do you see? There's a lot of times I've known several writers that have moved on to doing editing. I do both writing and editing.
mhm,
And through our chapter in the League of Utah Writers, we actually do regular anthologies, moving now
mhm.
to a point of doing annuals. So as a publisher, what do you see has been your biggest challenge of moving that through from writing to publishing? Kind of giving some insights to maybe some of those other people going, oh, I want to go ahead and just do it all myself.
Yeah. So publishing is very different, right? um, on one hand, it's really nice because I get to read like a bunch of stories and books and stuff like that when I do open calls, and I kind of get to see things before maybe they're out somewhere, you know. Um, so I get to read a lot of different horror that way, which is awesome because, you know, as writers, we should be reading a lot. Um, but yeah, like getting into it, just realize that it's way harder than you think it is. There's a lot more moving parts than you may realize. It's a learning curve, and it is not in any means like a get rich quick type thing. In fact, anthologies typically don't do great just overall. Um, they're hard to sell other than outside of conventions and things like that. For some reason, just regular selling of them, like the anthologies just don't move outside of conventions really.
Hmm.
I'll maybe sell one compared to like 10 other books, you know.
Okay.
But at conventions, they do quite well for some reason. I'm not sure why that dynamic is, and I'm also not complaining. So, but yeah, there's just a lot that goes into it too, especially when you're doing anthologies, because you have so many different people you're working with, right? You might be, you know, because I'm working with cover artists. I'm working with all the authors in there, making sure the edits are getting done, making sure everyone's getting their stuff done on time, moving things along. Uh, all the interior formatting has to get done, all that stuff that's got to get edited. And it just takes a very long time. Like, I would say if it's something you really want to do, you have to give yourself at least 1 year from open call to publication. Excuse me.
Mhm.
Um, to give yourself enough time because you're going to need that much. Um, that's saying if you've never done it before. If you have, you can get it done a little bit quicker. If it's the only thing you're focusing on, you can get it done fairly quickly as well. However, you you're going to hate life at the end of that. Just because the amount of like I said, all the moving parts, and then all the personalities you're working with. You know, for the most part, the authors I work with are great. Every now and then, you get that one kind of like person that's kind of hard to work with sometimes. Um, and I'm not going to name names at all.
Those are the ones that go on the special list.
But yeah, so like if that's not something you're into, like don't, because like I said, you're not going to make a ton of money um, as an indie publisher doing anthologies. The ones that do make a lot of money are the ones from bigger publishers that can afford the big names to throw in there. And even then, I'd be surprised if they do amazing.
So with what you're saying there, what's the benefit of being a publisher on your own?
So, what the benefit of like doing anthologies or just being a publisher?
Being a publisher.
Being a publisher, for one, When I created Timber Ghost Press, I did it because I wanted to create a small press that I would want to work with, right? My whole goal moving from the get-go was like, I'm going to create this press. I'm going to try and take care of my authors. I want to be a place that people want to work with. Because, I've worked with a lot of different small publishers out there. Some have been amazing and great. Some have not been that great at all. And it's all like part of the process and part of the learning. So now I can be like, okay, I don't want to be like that publisher, right? So we're going to do things this way. Or like, I really like what they did. So we're going to do things, like, we'll do that this way too, just to create a space for horror authors. Like I said, be a place they would want to work with, be associated with, all that kind of stuff. And I really enjoy being that part of the community too. Um, don't get me wrong, I love writing. I love being on that side of it. Um, but on the flip side, I love working with the authors. It's opened up my networking so much. I know so many more people now. And when I go to conventions like StokerCon or something like that and wear my Timber Ghost Press shirt, people are like, "Oh, Timber Ghost Press, I've heard of you. I've been hearing good things," and that's like, it's nice to be like associated in that manner and be a good thing in the community, because another unfortunate side effect of like small publishers is sometimes you get those really bad eggs that like screw people over, don't pay them the royalties they're supposed to, do things they're not supposed to, or publish like really cringy books. Um, and just you watch them collapse. And it's sad to see because, you know, a month ago they were a respected name in the community, and now like someone shined the black light all over their house and found all the bad crap. I don't know. So it's just a matter of like, why do I do it? Because I enjoy it. If I didn't enjoy it, I would not do it, because it is a lot of hard work. It can be stressful at times. I don't make a lot of money off of it. Um, a lot of times too, like I end up losing money on projects over the year, over the time that I have it. And that's interesting too, because I can put the same amount of effort into one book and the same amount of effort into another book, publish them, and this one does amazing, and this one I'm hardly moving copies and I don't know why, and I keep trying to fix like why this one's not working. And then the next one will do great, and then the one after that will do great, and then I'll have another one that's just like super hard to move and I don't know why, because they're amazing. But then again, it's all subjective, right? I think they're amazing. It may not catch someone else's. So
Well, I will say I do know that Timber Ghost Press is gaining an audience further and further. Again, Film Quest, not this past year, but in years past, I had one of your authors who
yeah.
had a short story published through someone else. The short story had been turned into a film that had made the festival.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got talking there about the film and everything was like, they were so excited that I knew you and knew about Timber Ghost Press. It was quite a fun experience, kind of going through
Yeah.
that.
I believe that was Caleb Stephens.
Yes.
He wrote Feeders for Timber Ghost Press, and that book is done quite well. So,
And the short movie that was made was Wallpaper Man.
oh, nice.
So I don't know if you know the story, but it's a very interesting. Uh, Not sure how to
Immediately
quite
makes me.
classify it. There's a man basically a creature that lives in the wallpaper protecting this girl in the house.
Oh, reminds me of a kind of a twist on the Yellow Wallpaper story,
A little bit, yeah.
whereas that one was not helping.
No, not helping at all there. So, we've kind of talked about what you're doing now, what you've done in the past, and what brought you to where you're at. So, on a personal level, what might we see coming forward from Sylvia Langille or CR Langille on the cover?
Oh my gosh. So I recently got an agent. So I'm with Stacy Condola now with the Rights Factory. So I'm working with her with the novel I wrote last year, or finished up last year, and it's like Alone meets Cabin in the Woods, where these it's a cosmic horror. Go figure. Um, but it's about a group of like professional like survival experts who think they're competing on a reality television show on this remote like wilderness forest island. when really they've been brought there to be like sacrificed and fed to this creature that wakes up every now and then. So that's awesome. Right now, I'm working on the edits from Stacy and her team on that. So hopefully, what I'm really hoping is that one can get into some places that I didn't have access to previously without an agent. So that's what I'm hoping for that. And then I've just started writing a new book that's going to be a series um, that is another cosmic horror. Go figure. But this one is fun in the fact that it's kind of a nod to the 80s, like slasher camp, summer camp slasher type things, but with a cosmic horror lens, and also kind of like comparing the transgender like journey of like self-discovery and acceptance with battling eldritch terrors. So
Okay. And how about from the chapter?
from the chapter, like what our next
Yeah,
anthology is going to be.
I'm
Yeah,
kind of plugging it because I submitted to it, but I haven't heard.
yeah. So the next one, which is still in the selection process, I'm waiting for the readers to finish up. But it is called No Exit, and it's the theme was a road trip or travel horror. So there's been I've been kind of poking through the stories too. There's a lot of fun ones in there. So I
Just to
think it's
give
gonna.
people an idea about how many stories did you have submitted for that?
For this one, we got wasn't a whole ton. I think that little caveat with Utah, because with the Utah horror collections or whatever, we always make a requirement that the story either has to be set in Utah or the author has to have some sort of connection to Utah. So we don't get a lot. We got about 100 or so submissions.
That's still
Um,
pretty good, I think, for an anthology on that type of level.
yeah, for sure. Like when we very first started, um, we barely had enough stories to fill the anthology. So there was a lot of like working with authors and stuff to get things up to where we wanted it. But then after that, like each year, like more and more people started submitting, and now we're averaging about 100 or so each time.
Okay.
Other anthologies I've opened up to that don't have that requirement get a lot more submissions, of course. But
Okay, so you got the anthology coming up, you got that. If people want to meet you and maybe get a copy of your books and get your signature in them, where are
mhm.
some locations they might be able to find you coming up?
Let's see. Coming up, I'll be at LTUE in Provo, the Life, the Universe, and Everything conference, convention, symposium. I'm not sure what they call it.
Symposium.
Yeah, but I'll be there for the whole thing. I have a table in the vendor room, and I'm also on a couple of the panels, I believe. Um, then after that, I'll be at StoryCon, which is geared towards like teen and young writers and whatnot. And I'll be teaching like a writing craft type class for that. And that's like the week after LTUE in February. And then after that, I think the next one I'll be at is at the Prequels Conference in March, I believe. It's a 1 day event here put on by the League of Utah Writers, and I'll be there for that as well. And I'll be teaching a class that goes kind of in depth on like behind the curtains of the small press publishing. So
Sounds like some good things and some good areas where people can kind of go out and find you. I'll admit I'll be at LTUE because I'm part of the board there. Uh,
mhm.
the other one after that, I had some people ask me why I didn't submit, and I'll admit it's because I have the very next week, I'm the panel coordinator for the SaltCon Gaming Convention, which
Yeah.
after we're finished up here, I want to talk to you about on a personal level before saying anything
Okay.
in public.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh, so I think, I agree with you. There's a lot of fun stuff going on, a lot of great places where they can find your work. Now, if they can't get out there and find you, where might they be able to find you on the socials or on the web?
Yeah, for sure. So you can go to timberghostpress.com for my publishing website, and then crlangille.com for my author website.
Okay, so very easy to find out there, kind of track you down. So,
Yeah.
you know, I just want to finish up with one final thing with you.
Yeah.
And then and that's the question of if you have someone that comes to you and says, I'm new at writing,
hmm
what advice would you give them?
Um, and they want to be a writer, I'm assuming is this
Yeah.
question. Yeah, I knew.
Or like I tell
advice.
people, the difference, moving, you want to be a writer? Do you want to be an author? Where do you want to go? What advice would you give them to advance their career?
Yeah, so there's two things really, and it's not going to be like amazing deep advice, right? One is read a lot in the genre that you want to write in, so that you know kind of what's being done, what's been done before, all that kind of stuff. Read outside your genre as well, because I think it helps bring perspective to what's going on. And then really just write. And don't get too focused on making it perfect, because it's never going to be perfect. Just write. Join like these professional organizations like the League of Utah Writers, or the Horror Writers Association, or the Romance Writers of America, or the Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America, right? Or association, I'm not sure which it is. But these types of things are going to get you in and around people who share your same passions. And I think that's huge for helping foster whatever it is you want to do and what genre it is you want to write. Because you'll find resources through these groups that can help direct you where you need to be at the moment, right? Like, especially if you let people read your writing and let people give you constructive criticism about your writing, and like really want to learn and progress. So
I'll agree with that. I'll kind of let people know I tried, I mean, I've written nonfiction stuff and because of my background being in technical writing and got that published. But when I started trying to write narrative, my technical writing was really impairing me. And it was through a writing organization that someone actually said, you should try this. And that led to
mm,
my first story being published. So it is a great way of doing things. So I want to thank you for coming. And you know, joining us here and giving some background and advice. Oh, I forgot. What about finding where to find the Horror Writers Association? You mentioned Timber Ghost, you mentioned yourself, but
yeah, um, really the best way is we have a Facebook presence, Utah Horror Writers, and we do have a website, though it doesn't get updated very often. But either through like Facebook, or let me find that email that people can write to. Dun, dun, dun. It is utahhorrorwriters@gmail.com. If you want to know more about what we do and like what we're all about when we meet, all that kind of stuff, send an email there and I'll get back to you. I monitor that daily. So that's probably the best way.
okay. So I'm going to close up and just open up the floor to you. Anything you would like to finish up with, anything you'd like to say? Uh, I kind of joke with when I'm talking with directors and film writers that this is your chance to give your Oscar speech if you want.
um, First of all, thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking with you, chatting, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on your show here and talk as well. So thanks for that. But as far as everything else, like, if you want to do something in life, you have to put forth the effort to do that thing. Like I said, I've been writing for over 25 years, and I'm still learning and improving my craft, and nowhere near where I want to be with my writing yet. And I'm constantly reevaluating how I write, how to tell a story, and how to scare people, how to get under your skin. And it's just a ongoing learning process. And I think if you approach things like that, it will help. So
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm going to drop this out there for everyone to know. If you get a chance to see Sylvia at a convention, a writing convention where she's teaching, uh, drop in on the class. I have learned some great things about like micro tensions and how to build dread. We've had some pretty good discussions. At the last Quills conference, I think we had an open group kind of discussing a storyline, which actually led to a story the story I submitted
yeah,
was the basis for that. So, I mean, there's a lot of good things Sylvia can teach you about writing, and take advantage of that. If you know people that like horror, please share this video out. Um, Let them know this is a great place to find horror. I'll add in some of the links as I get the reviews done on these two, I'll add those on, but I'll drop in some of the links of your other works that
Oh,
were
thank you.
done. And that way people can kind of get a feel for not only what you're writing, but also uh, for the things that you've been publishing. So thank you again. And if you would, like I always ask people, subscribe to the channel. It just helps to be able to do more in getting, great authors and other people in here that we can talk to. So until next time, take care.